I have this philosophy that you manage the person and not the team. Everyone's got a different personality. So you have to find out about what makes that person tick. How do they work? How do they like to be managed? You know, what motivates them to get up in the morning? How do you get the best out of that person? So coming from a sporting background, I did a lot of coaching early on, and I just took those principles on how to engage with people and how to manage people in that area. And I have this philosophy that you manage the person and not the team. And I know that might sound a little bit sort of on the way over, but everyone's got a different personality. So you have to find out about what makes that person tick. How do they work? How do they like to be managed? You know, what motivates them to get up in the morning? How do you get the best out of that person? And it's not about, you know, the threatening sort of, even with sellers, it's not about saying, well, if you don't make your quota this month, then you're out the door sort of remit. It's working out, well, why aren't you making your quota? Is it because of territory? Is it because you're not doing enough activity within there? Do you not have the right tools? Do you know how to use those tools that are there? So I think from when I first started, it was always about making sure that I felt part of the team, asking questions that, a mentor always sort of said to me, there is no stupid questions. There's only the questions you don't ask, sort of thing. So it's, it's just being confident to ask the stupid questions, and basically take that information in. So you're not asking the same question 3 or 4 times. It's making sure that you retain that information and you apply it next time around. And then you get the confidence of everyone. And that's the other biggest thing is having people having confidence in you and doing your job. And then everything else will work out smoothly. So that's sort of that approach that I've always taken.
I like this. That's right. Sorry, I was told my internet connection was unstable, so I'm not sure if you heard that question.
Yeah, sorry. It was the question around how do I create the culture?
Yeah, exactly. So, I'm just wondering if there's any, effects of your coaching days in sport and any implications that has on the team cultures you're trying to create. And I suppose the question is, what values are important to install in sales today?
Yeah. So the good thing, I think the biggest thing is in my team, it's finding out their strengths and their personalities. And when you're recruiting, I sort of find it's about, are those people, it's not about, is that person the best for the job, but it's how can they fit in with my team? So are they personable? It's also looking for different personalities, because if you have the same personalities in your team, it's almost like having just robots. So you have to have different personalities that will sort of entwine but challenge each other at the same time too. So I've got, I've got some eccentric people. I've got some people that are quite, introverted. So they don't speak out as much, and you just sort of got to prod them a little bit, but they're great at process. They're great at getting things done. Whereas I've got some other people that like to think outside the box a little bit. So I think that they can all leverage off each other. The other good thing too is that we get them to we have a lot of one-to-one meetings. My team's actually based up in Edinburgh. So before COVID, they were all in an office, and we have a very flexible working environment too. So when we talk about culture, it's adapting to their outside interests and making sure that, what we do for work fits in with also there. So for instance, I've got a couple of, people that, live sort of in Europe, and like to sort of, work from there. So I've got no problem with that. To me, it's almost like, if I create that environment, then my attrition rate is pretty low, because they won't get, before COVID, they would never get that flexibility elsewhere. They would have to take holidays and that. Whereas if you're connected, in a workplace environment, I don't really care where you work as long as you get the job done. And that's our philosophy that we do. And that's why, like, you know, my team is, I've only had 2 people leave my team in the last 7 years that I've been here. And I've kept, I've got one person coming up for 9 years, another one coming up for 8, and another one's coming up for 4 or 5 years. So I've got a really strong
that's incredible retention rate,
and that's based on the culture that we
the
create.
question I'm tempted to
Other
ask now
element of
is,
that is that
what
you have to
effects do you
take
see
that culture though
on
that you
the
have
business
your
when you
team
have people
and
around
try
for
and
such a
apply
long
it
time?
to
I mean, the obvious one's going
outside
to be
of other
obviously
teams,
more, because they'll understand
so
the
they
product more,
feed into it.
etc.
Otherwise, you can create a bit of a mishmash.
Is there a big culture here? I mean,
so it's just making
sure
sure that
such a long
culture we
team.
create is sort of like fed outwards to other teams, and how we integrate with other teams also too. Yeah, there's a couple of things. I think it's hard to create. I think it's hard to create career paths with them, only because they need to know where they go. So we're very open. I have a very open manner with them. But also my team is so entwined with the other outside sellers that our field reps are very comfortable coming directly to us to ask us the stupid questions on where to go, and they have confidence in us on getting the job done. Now, I think, and when you get feedback from your field reps about my team or team members, it's always rewarding when you hear the comment of like, and part of my, you know, if I sort of say this out of turn, is like, you know, we'll be stuffed if that person leaves. And it's not about because we haven't documented processes, it's just because that person knows what to do from point A to point B. And if something comes up in between, they can get the job done, or they can think on their feet. That's the element of it. Now, on the flip side, I think you still need to bring in new blood to rejuvenate stuff, because it can get a little bit stale. So that's the only other thing is just thinking like, how do you keep someone in a role for that long to be motivated to keep doing the same thing? Because it can sometimes be a bit Groundhog Day-ish. So you just need to sort of keep things a little bit fresh, make sure you're talking to them and making sure they're on the right path. Are they happy what they're doing? They're not just sort of saying yes sir, no sir, and constantly challenging them in their roles.
Yeah, now that's really interesting, Todd. I don't know how often you do this, but when I speak to other sales ops people, and they're talking about introducing new processes to the sales team, like, I don't know, a new lead qualification process or a new close framework. They say it can be difficult when you have sales reps who have been around for a long time, because they've gotten used to the system, don't like change. And I wondered how you reflected on that.
Yeah, we have a lot of change at the moment. So, you know, it could be anything from a new QA, you know, template that gets rolled out every other month because we added something else into it. It could be the fact that we've, you know, now merging into channel, where we were a very direct selling company. We're now transitioning to channel, trying to, you know, we've got reps that have been with us for like, you know, 10, 12, 13 years. So as you said, but they've gone through changes. It's just about communicating the change, making sure that they understand it and being open. So one of the things that I believe when we started is when we started, it was very open. It was like requests came in and it was like, we just sort of cherry picked. Whereas when I started, I was like, we need to have relationships. And this ties back into your question around relationships. And this also ties back into when new processes come in, it's the relationships that you build with your sellers that can make it easier. So I split my team up, and they actually have individual relationships with the field reps. So that's their first port of call. from that, they build a rapport with that person. They feel part of the team from a deal perspective. And anything from an onboarding, new training process or anything like that, that person is then responsible to sort of, or their first port of call to sort of help them out in that process and facilitate that area. So I think, you know, it ties back into the relationship area, is that if you don't have those key relationships and they don't trust you, they won't listen to the process, and all you become is quite a, you know, a parenting sort of rule set, like you do this way. And the biggest thing I think with processes too is that you've got to take the feedback back from the field, because at the end of the day, they are the ones that have to follow the process to get the deals done. And if they don't believe in the process, or they circumnavigate it, and they create, you know, unnecessary angst or issues, you're going to have a lot of, you know, roadblocks from closing deals and unhappy working relationships. So it's really key. It all ties back to relationships for me internally, making sure that your internal stakeholders believe and sort of get on board any new process that you roll out. But it's got to be clear, it's got to be documented, and it's got to show a purpose and like an end result. Like they've got to believe in it. It's not just we roll out a process for the sake of rolling out a process.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. On that note, how do you know that the process you're rolling out is going to be beneficial? And I'm really talking here about your planning stages.
Yeah, so we go through, in most cases, we'll go through a testing stage. We'll do some pilots. We'll be out working groups. And the biggest thing probably over the last couple of years is that we're engaging more of the field. So instead of an operations team and finance getting together and say, well, this is how it should work, what we need to be doing, and what we have been doing now, is right at sort of in the mid-range, once we identify the process, is then bringing in some field sellers to come in and just make sure that, are you happy with this process? Will this work? And gather that feedback back, because then we can adjust it if necessary, because we're getting that feedback back from the field. Now, not all sellers are going to like the process, but if you get at least a sort of a core sample of field reps that sort of agree with it, you know you're on the right place, and everyone else will fall in line from that. But it's really, from my point of view, it's really important to not just be an operational process that has to have the benefits from the field. Oops.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, we broke up towards the end there, but I did catch that. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I listen to lots of people actually have reps come in planning discussions when they're designing a new process. So that feedback from the field, as you say, is really essential. Now, we've been focusing our lens downwards onto the sales reps, and I wanted to extend it now into other stakeholders and departments from different revenue departments. Just give me, you know, the landscape of what it looks like, your interactions with departments and how that works, and then we can go into that.
Oh, sorry, Tom, can you just ask that question again?
So we've been focusing on sales reps. Now let's extend our focus upwards and sideways to other revenue teams. And I'm just interested in what the landscape looks like for your interaction with other revenue teams, and then delve down into how we can get relationships with these guys.
Oh, sorry, I can't hear you.
One second.
Todd?
Yeah, that's better.
That's better. I actually think there's a helicopter just circling our block, and I genuinely think that's disrupting something, because every time they do that, the Wi-Fi gets really shoddy. It's really annoying. Sorry, what are we?
No, this is central London, isn't it? Yeah, the question I was asking is, you know, we've been focusing on sales reps now, but I'm interested to extend our lens upwards. So
Yeah.
different revenue departments. What does your interaction look like with these guys? And then we'll build onto how do we create good relationships with them and what's important.
Yeah, so our relationships, we stem from marketing, because that's bottom or the start of your funnel, so to speak, from a lead generation and sales process point of view. So we work with marketing on basically capturing or making sure that we've got the right data that's in play for them to sort of roll out their campaigns and you know, their webcasts and everything like that. So we have a data ops team that sort of looks after that area. It's not perfect, it's ever evolving. And, you know, it's more and more relevant that data is never going to be 100% perfect, but we need to have the right areas in there, because that's what drives everything else in your business, from contacts, lead generation, adding in, you know, the information within Salesforce and you know, account wise. So the other elements we work into is with product, and that's more around it's more around, we call them SKUs, so product names and whatnot. So it's looking at the pricing on those elements on there, whether we need to create you know, we call them special SKUs for say a customized deal. We try and stay away from those areas because they're lengthy and troublesome, but sometimes they're necessary. It's also working with product if they retire certain products and having end of life campaigns, making sure that information is rolled out to the field reps. And we're sort of there, you know, there's a lot of information that goes out to the field. So we have to be on our toes and know where that information is collated, feed that back through and understand what processes happen in there. So we work with product on lots of different areas in there. The other element too is with finance. So it can come down to, once again, sales operations. While there's different elements on finance, it can be from margin control. We have a deal desk that work on that, but we will sort of feed into that area in that sense. But it could be margin analysis and helping out deal desk on that. It could be knowing the right type of discounts, your minimum discounting to high level discounting. Finance can also roll back in terms of accounts receivable issues. It's not the glorious sort of thing. We try and stay away from that area, but unfortunately, I think there's times where they just need they need a bit of more of a historical analysis on an account, and we can provide that from the data that we have. So and giving them a different viewpoint in that area. So we'll work with finance on those elements and that too. From my point of view, I work with finance directly on close one orders. So quota attainment, H2, you know, or sorry, our quarterly close one numbers. We also look at our historical close numbers too, so we can sort of see the variances in growth or not growth, either quarter over quarter and year over year, which is really important. So it took us a while to get there, to be honest, where we sort of constantly chop and change a lot of it, but we're in a pretty good place now that we can pull that information out quite quickly. And then there's I'm just trying to think who else. The main ones are marketing, and then the other ones we will do with is sometimes the operational teams too. So we have a incident response team that we work with. That's more about order creation, how to push through an order quickly. You know, and might be some you know, historical or forecasting that we'll do on a certain product for that team. And then you have our implementation team that we work quite closely with also too. So that's the team that would follow on after when orders are actually booked. You know, that there could be a delay in, say, client information or you know, certain information on from the client that we haven't received yet. So we'll work with our implementation team also too to sort of fill out, you know, answer any questions that they may have.
Yeah, okay. I want to go back to your third to last point where you said with finance, it took you a while to get to the place where you can do this monthly or quarterly reporting, but now you feel quite confident you're there. So talk to me about that journey. I think this is something lots of people struggle with, and they might appreciate learning from someone who's done it successfully, how you got there.
Yeah, the biggest issue we had is that, and I think a lot of companies, is that nearly every year you'll have a change from sales management where it would be, right, we have to change this team's name, or we split out a territory or a team. And while it sounds easy from a management point of view to do that, the issues that come out from afterwards is sit there and say, right, how do you collate that historical data? Because that relates to a different team. It's a lot of manual massaging of the data. You almost have to go back and strip it back and then put in, you know, re-put in those teams again to get to where you need to get to. And I don't think that there is an appreciation of the manual work that gets done when sales leaders just make a change for the sake of change. You know, so we do ask the questions, like, and there is pushback because we know it, of why they're making that change. And then, you know, make sure that they're aware of the timelines that, you know, the change is going to happen in Salesforce, then the reporting structure has to change, and then your QBR information has to change, and everything. So it's a knock-on effect on quite a lot of way through, even all the way working with finance and making sure that the information they have is correct. So that's the biggest issue. It's mainly saying that, are we in a good place? What are our plans going forward? But it's hard when you sit there, you know, business can sit there and say, well, we've got a 5-year plan, but you know, it's almost like that's the overarching plan, but you're going to have a lot of little plans underneath that to get to that 5-year goal. And they always chop and change, you know. So for instance, this year we split it out in 2 sections. We did H1 and H2. Now H1, when we come into H2, we're basically changed the whole sales team again. So that means our whole reporting structure's changed. Now, whether you that's right or wrong, that's a business decision that unfortunately, you know, you need to sort of go with. You can put your thoughts and you know, about what the ramifications will be, but ultimately a decision's made and you have to follow it regardless. So, and you make it work to the best of your abilities. We managed to do that. And the good thing is that it stems once again from relationships. And I think it's a key topic but if you don't have those relationships in those various departments and you feed that back through to them, they can just put up blocks. They can sit there and say, it's not my fault. It's, I've got other priorities. You know, this is not there, but making sure that you've got those relationships in play makes that job a lot easier. While they're, you know, they're not going to be happy about it, it's a lot easier to get it done. Yeah,
okay. Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. I mean, as more of a summary question here then, going off what you're just saying, what's the effects on sales ops as an individual, so you, and what's the effects on a business when we have great relationships with other revenue departments, and what's the effect when we don't have a relationship at all? And I'm thinking quite broad, big picture here.
Yeah. So for me, if you don't have the relationships, you're not going to get up each morning and enjoy going to work. It's like being in a bad relationship and you don't know how to get out of it. You start to sort of disband from the notion and the goal. So that's the number one key, is making sure you're working with good people and surrounding yourself with good people. As they always say, you always hear mentors like, you know, out in the field, like Tony Robbins and Gary Vanderveer and everything like that. Like, surround yourself with good people. So when you go to a new company, and you're doing your onboarding, reach out to people that you feel are going to have influence and can guide you, you know, to where you need to get to the quickest. and sort of keep those relations. So, for instance, when I first started SecureWorks, there was I made sure I sort of had a really key relationship with the general manager. Yeah. You know, I reached out to the finance director straight away because I knew that was a number one. If I'm not on board or I'm not having a dialogue with that person, it's going to be harder for my team to get things done. Yeah. We'll just be at the back of the queue. So it's identifying those people to see how can your job get done easier. And the other area too is working with the field reps. Field reps can be demanding. They're like little children, you know, in most senses. They can throw their toys out of the pram quite quickly. It's working with and building that relationship, knowing what ticks them, who's a bit more volatile sometimes than not, and then making sure that when you're challenging or that message to them, you're putting it in the manner that they can consume, and they're not going to sort of, you know, come out you at 1,000 miles an hour or anything like that. So you've got to take a step back. It's two parts. It's understanding the person you're relating with, and then the other part is just sort of constantly just having that dialogue. Don't just have one conversation. It's set up reoccurring meetings with them. Might even be 10, 15 minutes. Like our guys, I encourage my team to engage with our field reps, probably bi-weekly, for 15 minutes. And it's totally, it's not a requirement. It's up to them, because what I feel is that we get out as much of it as they do too. And when I jump on meetings with our field reps in a whole sense, my number one thing is that if you keep on asking questions about a process, well, you could have actually asked that in a one-to-one call, and not be shamed or named and shamed outside of it, sort of thing, because you had the chance. We're giving you that opportunity to sort of engage with us. It just depends, and that's it. I've got to coach myself on my reps too on how to engage with them. It can't be it's not a doctrine. It's not this is what you have to do. It's not black and white. It's an engagement. It's a coaching session. It's almost saying, you know, I would like you to do this, but this is up to you though too, because if you don't follow that process, then closing that deal might be a little bit harder for you in the long run. You're going to find some roadblocks, but coming to me now, we can figure out how we get over that. So those are the areas too that I believe.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, this makes a lot of sense. And I think lots of people in sales ops, especially as they get into bigger companies, they can lose that relationship with the floor, with the sales reps. They become very strategic and perhaps sometimes detached. So I think that's a really powerful message for people. Now, as a closing question, I always like to ask this. If you were in a room full of sales ops leaders, like the best in the world, what do you want to ask these people?
It's a good question. I think if I was in with sales leaders, would be, you know, it's almost what works best for you? What's best, you know, how do we engage? How do you get the best out of sales operations? It's finding out what works for them. What are their needs? And what they look for in sales operations. Everyone's different, you know. It could just be, I just want metrics. Yeah. You know, and then you sort of go down the metrics sort of route. It could be, I want a business partner. I want you to be part of my overarching team, and engage in that. And that's probably more the sense that's the answer you probably more want, instead of I'll tell you what to do. Yeah. It's that business partner answer that you're looking for. And if you get that, you know you're on the right track. I think you feel, you know, you're in the right position. You're working with the right people. You don't have a sales leader who is sort of telling you or what to do, but, you know, is sort of saying, this is what I want. This is what I need to make myself successful and my business successful. And then hopefully that they're also, what one of my good managers did was, in GM, he always challenged, even though that he was sort of saying, this is what I want, but I want you to challenge me. Like, if I say it and you don't agree with it, speak up, like, you know, and we'll come to a conclusion on where to go, but don't be a yes man, sort of area. And I think sales ops is getting to the point where they are more of a guiding factor. They make recommendations highly strung by data related recommendations, and leaving it then to the business leaders or the sales leaders like your CRO or your general manager or your senior VPs to actually make those decisions based on the data that you have. But we always make sure that we have our recommendations in there. We just, the only thing you have to take back, Tom, is don't get too disappointed when they don't take your recommendations.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that could be particularly frustrating when you know you've got the data to evidence what you're saying. But I guess there's always different priorities and different interests. More of a personal question, this one, Todd. But, you know, if there were a field, or if there were, you know, like an area of sales ops, you still feel like you need to conquer yourself, you know, this is like your personal development and understanding, what would that be?
That's a really good question. So my weakness, and this is a good thing, I'm not one to shy away from weaknesses. I think they're a good thing. So when people sit there and say, what's your strengths and weaknesses? I know exactly where I'm at. I know where my weaknesses are. My weakness for me is on quota setting and compensation. It's because of the business that we're in now. I've identified that. I've reached out to my peers and my leaders, and this year I've been brought into the process a lot more around it. Now the only difference is that we have a compensation team, so that element gets taken out from me. But if I was in a smaller company, obviously that's a position for me that is a weakness. It's not rocket science, to be honest, but it's something that I feel I need to be comfortable with instead of winging it. And that's the one thing, you know, anyone from sales ops, you know, you just sort of got to look around and identify your weaknesses and then reach out to say, how can I improve that? And don't be scared that it's, you know, you can't know it all. You know, but that is the one area at the moment that's the biggest glaring one.
I mean, it's difficult, right? It has such far-reaching implications on sales teams, how you set your quota, how you set your compensation. I mean, it can literally change how people sell, so it's very complicated. But yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and quotas, it's hard too, because it's a personal thing too, isn't it? You know what I mean? It's someone's livelihood. You know, it's how much they can make money. So setting it correctly, and then you get a lot of feedback come back from it and can be quite hostile. You know, then you got, you know, compensation questions that come up from a deal that gets done, and you know, does it relate to, and you've got to think about your compensation plan is being interpreted, you know, 10 different ways from sellers. So you got to have it be simplistic, communicate it quite clearly so that reps know about, you know, but reps are smart. They know how to circumnavigate it to their own benefit. So yeah, but it is one area that I'm learning every day on.
I mean, it can be a very messy business. Well, Todd, that was absolutely fantastic. I think this idea of relationships is so important in sales ops, because it's not just data analysis, it's not just forecasting and reports. Like you say, you touch so many hubs of the business. Being able to create rapport with people is so essential, and I really like your message around this, and it's really powerful. And I think sometimes it's not one that's mentioned often enough when we think about the main themes of ops, and that's something you mentioned in the beginning.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I'm a big, you know, I'm not the smartest person out there, but I truly believe that you have, in order for anyone to be successful, you know, you look at all the big CEOs, they'll say the same thing. Like, they are smart, but they surround themselves with smarter people to make themselves look better. They don't take the glory. They always sort of tone it down. But to me, that's what you do. I surround myself with good people people I can trust, and you build that trust, and they'll want to stay there, and you have open, clear dialogue with them. And you treat everyone, you know, as individuals. You know, you have a common goal to get to, but you treat everyone differently. And you just got to get to know that person.
Yeah, it's awesome. I really love it. Okay, Todd, so next steps are, I'm going to write this up in an executive summary style, and I'm going to